All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Stew on the Nut. Wow, I am really zoomed in. Let me fix that just a touch. Hey, everyone, welcome, episode 373, and I am joined tonight with former Army Lieutenant Colonel Brad Miller. And Brad, I want to welcome you on the Stew and the Nut show. None can't be here tonight, but thank you for joining us and coming on, giving us some of your Thursday night.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the invite, and appreciate being here and hoping to have a good conversation.
Awesome. Well, you're an Army guy, so you're near and dear to my heart as a Army brat and then retired first sergeant myself. So we can't mess with each other like when I bring on those Marine and Navy guys. I can always, I can bust their chops, but I guess I'm not gonna be able to do that tonight. But anyways, yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much. You were in the military. You were a West Point grad and went that route, the long gray line. I guess kind of give us a little bit of how that happened. I mean, not everyone can just get into West Point. It's not an easy school to get into. It takes a lot, and kind of what took you into the military itself.
Yeah, it's not an easy school to get into. Not an easy school to get out of, having graduated either. So I don't know how I got in. I'm assuming that there's another Brad Miller out there that was coming out of high school the same time I was, and they got the acceptance packets, screwed up, and he probably had to he probably went to the Naval Academy or whatever because he didn't get into West Point because they accidentally sent his acceptance packet to me. So, but yeah, I was coming out of high school. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So, and I had been thinking about the military for a couple of years. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what schools I was going to apply to. I didn't come from a military family, but I had been thinking about the military off and on throughout high school. So applied to West Point, ended up there, graduated in 2003, and from there entered the Army. So, yeah, so 2003 grad and ended up doing, 19 years on active duty.
Okay, so you went in 99 roughly, right before Y2K and the world was going to melt down. You're like, let me get into West Point. And,
well, it's interesting that so in terms of the timing that I was there, another thing that was really interesting was 9/11. So 9/11, which of course is in September of 2001.
Right.
So that was right after my third year had started. So I would have been a junior, so that, we had just everyone had gone off on their summer assignments or whatever. Everybody was coming back. The academic year had just started. And then 9/11 happens. And so I can remember that whatever the culture was at West Point before then, it changed pretty quickly. Just, the whole attitude across the entire military had to change because just now everything became very real, and very, very quickly. And so that same shift was immediately apparent at West Point as well, because now it was, okay, this is for real. Because I think anybody who was in the military at that time, a couple of days after 9/11, once kind of things started to escalate or whatever, people started to realize hey, this is for real, and people are going to start deploying over there, and we
Right.
knew that too, even as cadets. So I would say that of all things, that was kind of a defining moment within my career. Or I'm sorry, within my time at West Point, just something that was happening out there in the world that was very much going to shape the military environment. And then when I did graduate in 2003, this was just a couple of months after the invasion into Iraq had occurred. So, yeah, my junior and senior year were at West Point were very much shaped by what was starting to go on in Afghanistan. And then as I was literally ramping up to graduate, things were starting to kind of kick off in Iraq as well. So that was kind of the environment that I was graduating in, and then entering into the Army as all that was happening.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, right? Because I did half my career active and half in the National Guard, and I was in the New York National Guard when 9/11 happened. So,
Yeah,
you
okay.
know, I tell people, yeah, it became like being on active duty all over again. Like the whole guard changed, right? And I used to tell as a first sergeant, I used to tell soldiers once we got to about 2004, 2005, I'm like the days of I'm enlisting or re-enlisting to get college money were over, right? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I had soldiers that would come in new, brand new privates, or I'd have soldiers reenlist. I like you knew what you were getting into, right? It wasn't there wasn't like, hey, I'm just gonna just pick up some college and get out of here. After 9/11, everyone knew the game had changed. And like you said, I mean, I had soldiers that opted, they were like, no, I'm out. I'm not reenlisting, I'm not doing like, okay, it's not for you, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
You thought never gonna have to face that. But for many that do, I see as the lowest private, I'd be like, hey, it says a lot. You came in, whether you know what you're getting into or not. You came in without some preconceived notion that you were just going to skate and do one weekend a month or whatever it was. Because
Yeah, sure. Yeah, totally.
in
Hmm.
New York, it was game on from airports to power plants to
Hmm.
you name it, everything in New York City and all that kind of stuff. So I know what you mean. I can understand what you mean by at West Point. There's the attitudes changed overnight.
Well, and then also with West Point being in New York, it's only about 50 miles north of New York City, and I want to say it's about 60 miles north of Ground Zero specifically. So in that regard, it also hit pretty close to home.
Right. Mm. And you got nuclear power plants by there, which aren't far away. You got all kind of other stuff, and yeah, and you had, I think, if I remember right, I mean, President Bush was there probably your junior senior year. I think he spoke at one of the graduating classes.
Yeah, it's the graduating class of 2002. So
Oh,
the year before I graduated, yeah. I think he was there. So that was the bicentennial class. So West Point was founded in 1802. So the graduating class of 2002 was considered to be the bicentennial class. So I think President Bush spoke at that graduation. But yeah.
that that had to be a pretty awesome thing because I mean, everyone. I mean, he was just motivating everyone. Everyone was fired up, right? I mean, everyone was ready to.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I was actually not at that graduation ceremony. So I was going on a summer trip. So there was a summer trip as part of West Point that I was on with a couple other cadets, and we went to Honduras and Belize for about 15 days. And I remember that we had to depart a couple of days before graduation. So classes were all done, and
Right.
none of us that were going, we weren't graduating. We were all,
Right.
um,
Lower
let's
class.
see. Yeah, I had just finished my junior year. So a couple of us had just finished either sophomore year or junior year, but there was a group of us that left. So I actually missed that graduation
Mm.
ceremony. But
Okay.
but yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, that was a crazy time. Kind of that 2001 to 2003 to 2004 kind of time
Yeah.
period. The early years of the global war on terror. I mean, just a crazy time.
Well, Afghanistan was a free fire zone at that point. It was we were trying to figure things out when you had Takugar and all that kind of stuff, and then you had the roll into Iraq in '03, and it was it was a lot of people didn't know we were just steamrolling back in like we did back in Desert Storm, and
Mhm.
and probably a lot of young budding almost cadets and lieutenants were, you know, probably a lot of everyone wanted to be infantry, I'm sure, and everyone wanted to get into the fight, and
Everyone did want to be infantry. So that is a true statement. So in my class, and part of the reason that I did not become an infantry officer is because I wanted to be one. I had always wanted to be one since probably the end of my first year, and I put it as my number one choice. but so did, I don't know, 30+% of all the graduating males, and they
Right.
ran out of slots. And so I got my second choice, which was actually engineers. And
Okay.
then, so I spent, my career pretty much as an engineer, as combat engineer. But yeah, infantry had been far and away my number one choice, and I was devastated that I didn't get it. And then, a lot of my classmates that did get infantry, and then, anyway, yeah,
So you didn't get branch detail. I don't know if they do that at West Point like they do some of the other ROTC.
yeah, they do. Yeah, so guys can get branch detailed. Guys may go be an infantryman for a couple of years and then
Right.
go military intelligence or yeah, something along those lines. So that still occurs. Yeah.
Yeah, those kind of things. Yeah. Okay. So you were an engineer your whole time. And you did 19 years. You were deployed. I mean, deployed and stationed a number of places, probably Oconus and Oconus, right? You probably had tours. Did your command times, company commander, all that kind of stuff. I know you were in Honduras, right?
I was. Yeah, I was.
Was
Yeah.
that
So interestingly enough, as a cadet, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that
right?
we took a trip to Honduras. So then approximately 10 years later, I was back there, actually stationed there for a year. So that was interesting. Who knew that I would ever return to Sotocano, which is a little air base in Honduras. But yeah, so I spent a year there. That was actually the first job that I really held as a major. So I was there from 2013 to 2014. And I enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed Latin America. I've spent a lot of time in Latin America. A lot of people in the military are not familiar with the mission that kind of happens out of Sotocano Air Base. The name of the unit is Joint Task Force Bravo, but I had a great time there. And it's pretty interesting because there's a strong military to military relationship that the United States enjoys with a lot of the militaries all across Central and South America. And so I've been fortunate enough in my career that in a variety of positions I've had, I've worked with a lot of foreign militaries, to include a lot of the ones across Latin America. And one of those opportunities, of course, was when I was in Honduras for a year. So I actually really enjoyed that. A different mission set than what you're going to see, if you're in Afghanistan. So, I mean, I deployed a couple times to Afghanistan, but then I also spent this year in Honduras. I spent almost 3 years in South Korea. So, I feel like I had a diverse career and got to see a couple of different mission sets. And so for me, that just made my overall time in the military maybe, pretty enriching.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to see the world, right? As they would say. And
As they would say, yeah.
so you did how long in Korea? 3.5 years?
I did almost 3. Yeah.
That,
So it was a 2-year assignment, and then I extended for a 3rd year. So this was, I was a senior major at the time. I pinned on lieutenant colonel while I was there. So for those who are familiar with the way that the officer track would look for an Army officer, so I had already been a battalion operations officer, and then I'd been a brigade executive officer. I did that at the 10th Mountain Division, back in New York, actually, in Fort Drum, New York. So I did that, and then kind of as a senior major, then I took a joint assignment in Korea. So I was there for 2 years, but then while I was there, I got picked to be the executive officer to a 3-star, and I stayed on to take that position for a 3rd year. So stayed a 3rd year in South Korea and then returned back to stateside.
okay. Yeah. That wasn't like a company tour, was it? The 2 year? Was that when they were doing a company?
So yeah, I mean, I'm not married. I wasn't married at the time, so it didn't necessarily mean much to me one way or the other. But generally, those 2-year assignments would be accompanied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was in Korea 89, 90, and
Okay.
It's 1 year hardship, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Smart guy. I wish I would extend it. As soon as I got back to the States, I wish I'd have stayed, because in 89, 90, short of Panama, that was the only thing that was real deal for an infantry guy. And
Now, where were you?
I was
in
up
Korea.
at Camp Greaves, so I was right there on the Imjin River.
Okay.
And all got turned over. I think probably before they turned over to the Rock, so it was no more. I think they pulled the American. All they had was JSA up there. I'm not sure that any American forces up there except for the ones that rotate through. We used to call them summer camp because we did the winter mission because we lived there, but they rotate other units in there to be QRF and stuff for.
Yeah, and even now they've turned over even more bases. But I spent the first year on Yongsan in Seoul, and
Yeah.
then I spent the other 2 years at Humphreys. So they built Humphreys, it's massive, and then they moved the command. So the big 4-star command, they moved from Seoul to Camp Humphreys. And so when the command moved, I ended up moving with it. But I am very familiar with kind of the Imjin River, where JSA is, because the assignment that I had, so I worked for what was called the United Nations Command Military Armistice Commission. And so we were the ones who would control the DMZ on behalf of the commander, the 4-star commander. So we would work very closely with the JSA security battalion, but then also we had guys from our own unit that would work right there in the JSA or would work along other spots of the DMZ. And we would do a lot of periodic inspections in the DMZ. So I spent a lot of time in and around various parts of the DMZ. So yeah, Korea is a cool place.
Yeah, I wish. I really wish, like I say, I would have stayed. I had some of my greatest memories are from there. Some of the best people I were, and it was a real deal mission.
Sure.
It didn't seem, especially back then, and yeah. So were you in Korea when Abe Abrams was the 4-star?
I was.
Yeah,
I was.
Abe was my company commander, Desert Storm.
Okay.
And we have maintained tight relationships and good friendships ever since. And I don't know how an E5 mortar guy and a company commander that had everything in on Fort Hood named after him. But yeah, we went to Desert Storm together and all that. And then I remember he got NTC commander. I was actually on the phone with him when he found out he was getting his star and was going there. And it was a good one. He was surfing actually at the time, which was pretty funny. And then got 4-star after he left, third ID, and which is the last time I saw him when he went to Pentagon and then went there. Yep. And it's been a long time. And I used to talk to him when he's in Korea. I'm like, how much longer are they leaving you there? I'm like, man, you've been there a long time. And now he's wonderfully retired, enjoying life. But yeah, Abe and I go way, way back.
So he's funny. So he got there. So the last year that I was there, he took command. So I was there from 2017 to 2020. So when I got there, General Brooks, his predecessor, was in command. Yeah. But I have a funny story about Abrams. I'll tell you in just a moment. But when I got there in the fall of 2017, it was fire and fury. Remember all the rhetoric, fire and fury, little rocket man, my red button is bigger than yours. Like that's the environment that I'm kind of going to Korea within. That's everything that's kind of happening. And I'm like, man, is this about to pop off? And
yeah,
and Koreans were not freaking out at all. Like when I got there, like the South Koreans were just like, this is just, typical. But anyway, but 3 years later, the big thing is, all the madness with COVID. Well, I was in South Korea when all of this was kind of happening, but right as I was about to leave, so I had pinned on Lieutenant Colonel and I'd been selected for command. So I ended up taking command of a battalion in the 101st Airborne Division. But I got selected for command, and Abrams was my senior raider. So that last year I was the XO to a 3-star, who was my raider, and then his boss, which was Abrams, the 4-star, was my senior raider. Right. But I never really had any personal interactions with him. And Abrams has a reputation, for kind of being, haughty and strict. And so I am leaving Korea. I am out processing, and I got my packet of stuff, and I got to go around to all these places around the installation and get all the signatures in order to leave Korea.
Do lieutenant colonels go to the turtle farm? Is that still a thing? Was there a thing called the turtle farm? Was that ever? No?
Yeah, the turtle farm.
Turtle farm.
I feel like I feel like I do recognize that name, but I can't recall exactly what it was.
It was the in-processing, out-processing replacement. So the in-processing building was here, and there was a ditch about a foot wide between that and the out-processing building, and they called it the turtle farm because it took you a year to go from one building to the one right next door.
Yeah, but where was that? On what base was that on?
That was on TDC. That was in down in Camp Casey. I'm sorry, Camp Casey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, and so I was at Humphreys, but I think that like cultural memory and that name, like I think still persists because I would hear people talk about that. But so I'm walking out of the building, and Abrams is coming in, and I'm walking out. I got my packet. I got to go do some out processing, and I hear this big booming voice that is like, "Hey!" And I'm getting ready to walk out the door, but there's nobody around in this little hallway. And And I turn around and it's Abrams and like his driver and stuff and me. So I'm like, I guess he's talking to me. So I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, hey, are you the one that's going to go take command of a battalion in the 101st? And I'm like, yes, sir. And he's like, hey, I want you to come talk to me. I got some advice for you. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, sir. So anyway, so I go do whatever I got to do. I come back that afternoon and I go up to his front office and I'm talking to the guy who would schedule, on his calendar. And so I go in and I'm talking to that guy and I'm like, hey, I ran into General Abrams, downstairs earlier today. And he told me that he wants to talk to me. He's got some advice for me for command. And the guy just started chuckling. And he's like, yeah, he found out you got selected for command. He just wants to meet with you. So anyway, so a couple of days pass. I'm supposed to have 15 minutes with General Abrams, one-on-one. And we ended up speaking for about 55 minutes, and just had a great talk just about battalion command and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, that was kind of my one-on-one interaction with General Abrams. But I leave his office. And the chief of staff, who was a 2-star, was supposed to meet with Abrams after me, but we ran 40 minutes over. So he's been outside Abrams' office kind of waiting. And he's like, oh, so it was you that was in there monopolizing the boss's time. Anyway, it was just kind of funny. But yeah, that was...
he's I've said it for years. He's a soldier. And he was probably one of the last left in the GO rank. And he was that was him. I mean, buddies of mine that I deployed to Afghanistan with, they after I retired, they were in, our brigade was in JRTC, and he went and found that he walked into the TOC of the 27th Brigade, New York Army National Guard, and walked in and said, "Who here knows fucking Troy Stewart?" And my buddy,
oh really?
He's an OPSAR major, and he goes, "Come here, let's get a picture and send them." And my buddy does not do selfies and stuff. Next time I get a text from Abrams, it's me and my buddy Ron, and he's like takes a picture in the top, and everyone's just staring because. I think that time, I think he was a force com commander. He was 3-star. Yeah. And like the 3-star just walked in, yelled out, and everyone in the brigade knows my name. I just retired not too long. So one, they all flipped out because he said my name. And two, he grabs his E9 and they do a selfie together. And so he could send it to me. And everyone's like, oh, I guess we're good with him. And he sends it to me and I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, guess who I'm hanging out with? Like, yeah, you're at my brigade. Awesome. I retired several years ago.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah.
He's a good cat. I haven't reached out to him. He's been on this show a number of times.
Okay, cool.
Oh, his PAO, when he was 3rd ID commander, used to flip out because he would just call in and the PAO had to sit on the line and had no control over the You get 15 minutes with the old man. Okay, an hour later, it's talking about whatever he wants to talk about. And he'd tell me, he would text me, say, my PAO is twitching out over here. So yeah, good people. Well, hey, so you went on to Fort Campbell, Engineer Battalion, Lieutenant. How'd that go?
Yeah, well, so that was in 2021. So so I took command in 2021. I took command in June, and generally that would be a 24-month command. I was in command for about 4.5 months. And then long story short is I got relieved of command for refusing to comply with the COVID shot mandate, which I was never going to go along with. There was never a chance that I was going to comply with it. But even more than that, on the day that I took command, I knew that there was no way that I would be in command for 2 years. I mean, I knew with surety that I was going to be fired. And so that would happen about 4.5 months later. And then, so I took command on June 10th. On August 24th, so about 2.5 months later, that's when DOD implemented the COVID shot mandate. About 2 months after that, that's when I was relieved of command. And then, so at that time I had about 18.5 years. And I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do now? I'm a battalion commander. I'm a lieutenant colonel who's just been fired from battalion command. I'm 1.5 years away from qualifying for retirement. What am I supposed to do? And what is going on with our military? What's going on with our government?
Right.
So long story short, once I realized the depth of, I would say of this, exactly what was happening with this mandate and just how unequivocally unlawful it was. And the fact that it became clearer and clearer that DOD was not going to walk it back. That's when I ultimately resigned. So I ended up resigning And by the time that I actually got out and finished my time, I had served 19 years, 3 months, and 15 days on active duty.
And there was no way you could have stayed longer and not had the shot, right? There was.
I mean, there's maybe, I mean, could I have found ways to stall? Yeah, probably, but I wasn't going to do it. So like, I never submitted for a religious accommodation request. Now, could I have done that? Yes. Did I
I heard
consider it?
those
Yeah,
proved
but
it all.
correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
But I never even tried, because sometimes what people would do is they would get one, they would submit it, it would go through the approval process, which would take some time. It would come back denied, and then they would try to appeal. But meanwhile, while that's happening, they're buying themselves some time,
Right.
So being at 19 years, where I was, is it possible that I could have stalled for time? Yeah, probably. But I wasn't going to do it. It was a principle thing, because, I thought this was treason, and I still think it was treason. And so I got to look myself in the mirror every day. And I was like, there's no one in this organization that I want to work for. No one. And yeah, I might have left with, my career having ended prematurely. Yeah, that's true. And I don't have a retirement pension, or I lost my job, which is a well-paying job. All those things are true. But I also left with my oath to the Constitution unbroken, and I left with my integrity intact. You can't put a dollar sign. You can't attach a dollar figure to either of those. And so that's the way that I felt. And that's the way that I still feel now. So no, I don't regret it. I'm frustrated. I'm angry that I was ever placed into that situation. But I got to a point where, and I know this is going to seem paradoxical to a lot of people, but I got to the point where I could not reconcile continued service in the institution with the oath that I had taken to the Constitution. So I know that sounds weird, but I felt like the military had completely lost its way. Now, fast forward, 3 or 4 years, and I think that is even more clear than it was then. And to me, it was pretty clear then.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine the pressure that you faced, being a lieutenant colonel in command from your peers and a number above you at 06, 07, whatever level, all up through command, of them going to just play along, just go with it. I can imagine. What was your sergeant major? Was he supportive of this? I mean, was the NCO Corps? Was there anyone on your side, either in publicly or behind the scenes, kind of like,
It's a good question. So, was there really anybody on my side? No, not really. Not really. I mean, I have to be honest. Now, I will tell you this. So you mentioned my sergeant major. My sergeant major was a good dude. I don't think we quite saw eye to eye on that issue. He knew where I stood. He never tried to talk me out of it. I think he just realized like that was just, there was no way he was going to be able to talk me out of it. So I think he kind of accepted it, but I don't think clearly I don't think he agreed with my position on it, and probably thought that I was being, unnecessarily zealous or whatever. I think my predecessor thought the same thing. Now, my predecessor, the guy that I took command from, he did. So I had told him, in fact, we had a conversation. This is before I got to Fort Campbell. And I had a conversation with him, and I told him, hey, the mandate had not gone into effect yet, but the writing was on the wall. Everybody knew it was coming. And I said to him, hey, what's the attitude there with the COVID shots? Oh, by the way, I haven't taken the shot and I'm not going to. And I was met with silence on the phone. I think he did not know what to say when I kind of, mentioned that to him. So anyway, but we had, other conversations about it. Then I get to Fort Campbell, and he and I go through, a 10-day transition or whatever, as he's leaving and I'm coming in. But I do remember after I got relieved, that guy sent me a text and was like, dude, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something like, I admire your conviction that you saw this through. Like, you stuck to your guns to the point that they relieved you of command. And so, but even people like that who reached out to me afterwards were very few and far between. I did have one of my company commanders who reached out later and told me that they felt like they had suffered an injury from the shot. This was like 2 years later.
Wow.
I got a text that basically said, "Is this Lieutenant Colonel Miller?" And I said, "Yes." And then the response that I got back was, "You were right not to take the shot." So anyway, so we ended up talking on the phone, and basically the story that I got, which has been shared publicly. So I'm not necessarily, I mean, this individual's already gone public with the story about this. So I'm not sharing anything that I'm not violating anybody's privacy here, but basically this individual had shared that, that they felt they had been injured by the shot. So yeah, I got a couple of people like that who reached out to me. In my battalion, people were very cool with me. I mean, I never really, caught people behind my back kind of talking about the fact that I wouldn't take the shot or whatever. My brother battalion commanders, so my peers, same thing.
Right.
The brigade commander was a good dude. I mean, I think he's completely wrong on this issue. I think he's as much of a coward as the rest of them, but he was a good dude, and he was a good dude to me. So even though I was kind of under the gun, just like everybody else was, he never put undue pressure on me. He did tell me like, "Hey, go take the shot." But he did that because that's what everybody was doing to their subordinates who had not taken the shot. But he knew exactly where I stood. I had made it very clear. And then the division commander was JP McGee. He's now a 3-star, but he was a 2-star. He was the 18, or he was the 101st Airborne commander at the time, and he, we had a one-on-one meeting about it, and I had told him I wasn't going to take the shot. He knew that, and even though he's the one who ultimately relieved me, for the most part, I felt like even we kind of had an understanding as to where we were on this issue. We were two gentlemen, both Army officers, both commanders on opposite sides of an issue. He just happened to be a 2-star, and I was a lieutenant colonel, and he just happened to be on the same side of the Army, and I wasn't. So, we know how that's going to work out. I do believe that I was on the side of the Constitution. I do believe that I was on the side of the law. I do believe that I was on the side of the truth. I do believe that I was on the side of the country. I believe he was on the wrong side of all of that. And as much as I thought that 4 years ago, I think that's much, 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 much clearer now. So, yeah, do I think all these generals and colonels are cowards? Absolutely. Would I go back into the Army right now? No.
Oh, so you didn't? Did you get the call? Did you get the offer to come back in? That I know some have done. I think around 8 or 9. But
yeah, I don't know that anybody's called me. If they have, it's from a number that I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. But I actually did call and tried to talk to somebody and talk to some civilians who had no idea about the questions that I was asking them. So I don't really feel like an offer's been made to me, but also I think that there are a lot of illusions that DOD is propagating as to what's actually happening with the reinstatement process compared to reality. And so a lot of what DOD is saying is happening with the reinstatement process is just frankly just not true. I don't think they're moving as quickly as they want everyone to believe when it comes to offering reinstatement. I also think that what they're truly offering is different than kind of the illusion that they've created. So there are two very clear categories of people, according to DOD. There are those that they consider to have left the military involuntarily, which means you didn't take the COVID shot and you were kicked out. And then there's by the way, that number, according to DOD, is considered to be about 8,600 folks across all the military who were kicked out against their will because they didn't take the COVID shot. There is a much larger group, and many estimates say 100K or larger, of individuals that DOD considers to be voluntary separations. So that would be people like me who resigned. That would be people who their term of enlistment was up and they chose not to re-enlist because they weren't going to take the shot. But if it weren't for the shot, they probably would have re-enlisted. And it probably even includes people who, let's say you were at 20 or 21 years, so you were retirement eligible, but you might have otherwise stayed to 30, but you chose to retire because you were already eligible and you didn't want to take the shot. So all those individuals DOD considers to be voluntary separations, and their reinstatement package is a lot different. So there are two major differences between those groups. If they consider
Were they flagging people getting, like the ones that you talked about that didn't reenlist, where especially enlisted folks, right? Were they flagging them, not allowing them to reenlist, and flagging them a favorable actions when they refused to take it? Because they were essentially breaking a lawful order, right, by not taking it. Was that the
Well, right, but now DOD has come out and said that the whole mandate was unlawful. So
right?
the whole time they were telling you, like, if you look at my relief for cause eval, it says I failed to disobey a lawful order. That's a lie. That is a lie. I knew it was a lie at the time. I didn't challenge it because I knew that the whole, I'd be challenging the whole weight of the Army.
Right.
But it was a lie. But now Hegseth has come out both verbally and in writing and said that the mandate was unlawful, which means people like me who got relieved of command were unlawfully relieved of command. But to your question, there were people who faced all types of unlawful coercion because they did not obey this order that everyone was going around saying was a lawful order. So this is why it's problematic that they draw such a clear line between the voluntary and the involuntary separations, because the line's actually a lot more fuzzy. Because when you back people into a corner and you force them to comply with something that is unlawful and you deprive them of their constitutionally protected rights, which even service members have, then you can't then say that their separation was voluntary when you were backing them into a corner trying to get them to either allow themselves to be deprived of their rights or comply with an unlawful order. But here's the major difference between those two groups, the way DOD looks at it. If you are involuntarily separated, so if you were kicked out and you didn't want to leave and they kicked you out, then what they would say is, okay, we're going to offer you reinstatement. And when you come back in, we're going to credit you for the time that you lost. So let's say there was exactly 3 years between the day that you were kicked out and the day you put the uniform back on. They would credit you 3 years as time served, and they would offer you the back pay. Now, that comes with a lot of stipulations, but this group over here, the much larger group, potentially 100K of individuals that they consider to be voluntary separations, there's no credit for time lost as time served, and there's no back pay. So you can also come back in, you can put the uniform back on. Hopefully you can pick back up roughly where you left off, but you will have lost those 3 years or whatever. I say 3 years because that's about what it would be for me.
Right.
But even with the back pay that they're offering, well, that also comes with a lot of stipulations because they calculate a lot of offsets. So during that 3-year time period in which you were out of the military, well, you probably went and got another job. So they're going to factor in all of that pay that you made, and then they're going to calculate that as an offset. So that's going to largely decrease what they're going to pay you in terms of the back pay settlement.
So they're going to say, just for numbers, right? Okay, you lost $150,000 over 3 years, right? E5 or so makes about 50 grand or so, right? And with everything, depending on if they're married, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But let's do that. And you went and got a job for that 3 years. And in that time of 3 years, you made 100,000. So here's your 50,000 of back pay. You come back as an E5, right? You still got to get back in the promotion schedule, right? They're not going to be like, oh, you'd be an E6 by then. Here's your E6, right? You start back.
So a lot of people are criticizing that because so that's a great question. So if they credit you, you left as an E5, you come back 3 years later. Okay, they're going to give you that 50K, not the 150K, because they're going to calculate that 100K offset that you made at your other job over 3 years, right? So they'll offer you 50K, and then they're going to say, hey, we're going to credit you 3 years of time served, 3 years of service, to calculate that time that you were out. So then here's where it gets tricky. So what does that mean? Would that put you over the hump for E6? Or, hey, is there a schooling assignment that you missed? Or is there some other thing that you would have needed to make you competitive for promotion that you missed because you were kicked out or whatever, Right. And then here's the other thing. There are people who didn't get kicked out. There are people who maybe they were going through that process of the religious accommodation request. And so that was being litigated over time and they were kind of able to stall. Maybe they made it up to the point where the mandate was rescinded, which happened in January of 2023. So there were people whose careers were salvaged at the last moment. But for 2 years, that individual might have been, or a year and a half or so, that person might have been totally marginalized.
Right.
So they still may have lost a promotion opportunity, or they may have lost a favorable assignment going somewhere where they wanted to go, or a schooling opportunity or whatever. So what do you do to make that up for them? Or have you marginalized their career in a way that's going to be hard for them to repair,
Yeah. Oh, it's great. You were going to be company commander, but you spent that year and a half being in charge of the mess hall. That was the lieutenants, captains, and that's just deal with it, or get the damn
or your eval report.
Right.
Your eval report that you got for being the person who didn't want to go along with the shop mandate.
Probably not going to get a 1 block or a 2 block as an officer.
So are those going to get expunged? So right. See, there are a lot of questions that still have to be corrected. But here's the other thing. So if we talk numbers, so DOD wants you to believe that 8,600 people lost their careers because they focus on that very small number of those that were involuntarily kicked out. What people like me continually say is it's more like 100K that represents the full number of people who lost their careers specifically because of the COVID shot mandate. So of those two groups, how many people have come back? Well, if you look at the numbers of the 8,600, those involuntarily separated, I believe the latest numbers that I have seen, which are as of about a week and a half ago, supposedly 17 have come back and put the uniform on. Of the much larger group, the 100K, three have come back in and put the uniform back on. So here's where it gets tricky. Of that 8,600, only 700 and some, have even expressed interest in coming back. So less than 10%. And of the 10% that have even expressed interest, only about 10% of those have actually started to, submit a packet. And of those, only 17 have actually finished the process and supposedly been reinstated.
Well, let's just call it what it is. Right? Those are probably, I would say it's safe to say, those are probably people that didn't have a good job or didn't have a good career from the out. The guys and gals that got out and made it and got a new career and started a new job that pays well. They're probably going, why would I want to go back to that?
Why would I want to go back? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're like, oh, I miss the military. I miss my friend, but time has passed. They're on. I'm not going to go back into the same platoon or same company or whatever, or the same job. And God forbid they're an officer or a field group. There's or a senior NCO. Everyone's going to be like, hey, welcome back. Everyone's going to give you that side eye. Right.
Well, and so that's kind of the unspoken question. If these individuals come back, is there now going to be this us and them mentality on both sides? Because they're going to be people like me, where I freely admit, if I were to go back, I mean, there's not a general in the Army that I want to work for, at all. I think they're all cowards, all of them, zero exceptions, because when their country needed them most, they chose to side against their country, against the Constitution, against the rule of law. And the thing is I know there was a lot of obfuscation that was going on when the COVID shot mandate came out. There was a lot of lying. There was a lot of collusion between DOD and the FDA to misrepresent an unlicensed product as being interchangeable with a fully licensed product. I mean, willful collusion that was going on between DOD and FDA. So I know, there were crimes that were very clearly and unequivocally committed. DOD is now admitted to it being unlawful. But I realized that people may not have necessarily understood that in August of 2021. But that was 4 years ago. So much has come out. There have been so many red flags, so many questions, so much new information that has come out. Well, and not a single...
It's 2020. Right. Which is probably why you heard from some of those people after going, man, you did the right thing. We shouldn't have got the shot, all that stuff.
But even that number was very, 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 very few and far between. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I didn't hear from any generals. I didn't hear from any admirals. I didn't hear from any colonels. I have
same leaders that let Afghanistan happen the way it happened. Right.
Sure.
Which is a little pissed off at and sick. I can see what you say. There's no one I'd want to work for, because there were many that could have thrown their rank down. I'd be like, this is absolutely we are doing this wrong, and I can't be part of an organization that conducts operations like this.
Bingo. So, when you're in the military, you gotta be able to trust your leaders, and that doesn't mean that you expect your leaders to be perfect. They're not going to get everything right. They're not going to know everything, and I understand that. But you got to expect, first of all, you got to expect a certain level of competence, but there's also got to be a certain level of adherence to values. In the Army, I mean, we have the Army values. So if I go
Right.
down the list of the Army values, well, as an organization, the senior leaders violated every single one. So where is this sense of, the military has a very well established ethos. We talk about it all the time.
Right.
You want to believe that the people to your left and right, that they want to be members of the team, that they will sacrifice of themselves for the team. And I'm not even talking necessarily about the ultimate sacrifice. I'm just talking in general terms,
Right.
Sacrificing, giving of themselves for the good of the team, teamwork, people realizing that they're part of something that is bigger than themselves. And you have to assume that your leaders are going to do the right thing and that are operating lawfully. And I can't say that about a single senior military leader, because when push came to shove, they all proved to be weak, pathetic, cowards. I mean, I could go on, and that's strong language, but I mean it to be strong,
Yeah, no, I get it. And that's, especially when I look at someone at your rank, at that level 05, you come back in, let's say they let you back in, they do the offsets, who knows, maybe you'd have to pay them money. I don't know. And,
Yeah.
again, you're just going to put you right in the mix. Okay. Let's go get you an assignment to finish up the other year and a half of your command time. No, right. They're going to stick in some staff weenie position and just make it miserable. And, they're going to, unless someone gets in a position of authority, that says, oh, this person's solid regardless of what happened, the chance of that, I mean, you might as well start playing the Powerball. I mean, it isn't going to happen. They're just going to be like, put him over in the corner and let him finish his time. You're not going to get a chance to compete for 06. You're not going to get a chance for, hell, look at General McMaster, man. He wrote this, a big fan of his. I mean, he was in Desert Storm. He was a battalion commander for my old sergeant major, wrote letter as part of War College, damning the officers that led Vietnam and how Vietnam was such a failure. That guy sat at 1 star longer than anyone I've ever known. I mean, I was blown away when he got a 2nd star, because I never thought he was ever going to get past that, because he called people out.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for them to retire out and flush through and get new leaders get in place where they necessarily weren't butthurt over that.
Yep.
No,
I agree. Yeah, it's a great comparison there with what happened with Vietnam. You're right that he called that out, wrote about it. And then you also mentioned, I was talking about the COVID shot mandate, but as you mentioned, at the exact same time the COVID shot mandate went into effect, we had the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. So to me, those are both symptoms of the same type of problem. So what happened? So you get a battalion commander over in the Marine Corps, Stu Scheller. So what does he do? People may remember his video that he got in big trouble for, because he made this video. He ends up getting thrown in the brig for a couple of days, ends up getting court-martialed. He loses his career. But
now he works
what was his message in that video? It was lack of accountability.
I think he does work for DOD now. I believe he got him a job.
He does.
So
he does. So he works. So he works for DOD, and he also is working in the section of DOD that is putting together this process to try and reinstate people that lost their careers over the COVID shot mandate. So I like Stu Scheller. I think he's a sincere guy. I just think that this problem is much bigger than people kind of want to assume it is. And so I think that the overall solutions are going to have to be much bigger than what people probably assume they're going to have to be.
Yeah. It's not easy problem. I mean, they could, you hear about reparations and all that stuff. I mean, I wonder if they even thought maybe they should pay reparations to all those folks and just be like, look, don't even bother coming. Like, you can come back in, or we're just going to give you a check. I mean, we did you wrong. It was an unlawful order. You probably, I don't know how they would calculate it, but I mean, that's something they could do too, possibly, if they want to kind of make right the wrong, but obviously it's going to cost money.
Yeah. It's gonna cost money for them to fix what they've done, but they have to start from, and this is where I think DoD's words and actions are not congruent, because I don't think they've even gone far enough with even saying the right thing, but they've said a lot more than they've done. So there's a lot of divergence between what they've said and what they've done. And I don't even think they've said enough, but they have said things like, this was unlawful, this was unfair, this was overly broad, and it was unjust. I mean, they've used that type of language in a way to kind of say, hey, we're going to try to make this right. And I think those are all good steps forward. They're not nearly far enough. And people like me look at this and say, you're not trying hard enough. Try harder. If you wanted to fix this, you would. So fix it. But even if you take their words and you compare them with what they're doing so far, there's still a lot to be desired.
Well, I mean, one of the worst things a leader could do is be a hypocrite, right? We all know our subordinates, whether in the civilian world or military, look up and see how their leaders act and behave, right? So that's why we have the Army values and the tenets and the NCO creed and all those different things, right? To try to
sure.
They're all anti-hypocrisy. Is what they are. It's like, don't do what I say, don't do what I tell you, don't do what I do kind of stuff. And I mean, I just wonder now as myself, like if I was still in, or I'd worked my way up to be a senior NCO or whatever, and I'm getting my NCOER, or as an officer, getting my OER, and they reference the Army values, whether I support them or not, I would kind of want to look at like, what did you like? I mean, it would be hard to still be in today and seeing how this transpired, and then see how they backed it out and said, oh, it wasn't lawful. They threw all these people out, and then have someone that was part of that kind of critique you or criticize you and say, well, you don't really live up to the standard. Like, I'm not sure you have to tell me that.
Yeah. I used to, when I was a brigade executive officer, this is for 2nd Brigade in the 10th Mountain Division. And so we would have,
2nd Brigade. That was Catamount, wasn't it? 287?
287 was one of the infantry battalions in 2nd Brigade. Yeah. So you had, at that time, you had 7 battalions that were in the brigade. So I was the brigade executive officer. So one of the things that I would do is, when there was going to be a company change of command, the 2 commanders, the incoming and the outgoing, they would come see anywhere in the brigade. They would come see me and do an in brief with me as the brigade executive officer. The out brief would be to the brigade commander. So before they're going to start their inventories, and start going through kind of their transition, the 2 of them come see me. And then they're going to go through all that. And then right before they're going to actually do the change of command, they'll meet the old man, and he'll talk to them in the out brief. So I would talk to these captains. And one of the things that I would tell the incoming company commander is, hey, being a company commander is different than what you were doing up to this point. So like, whatever your tactical acumen is, that is very, very important. But now you got to bring something else to the table too, because as a company commander, you got all these other things you got to worry about too. You're going to have to put some time into the administrative piece. You got to make sure your evals are straight. You got to make sure that your awards processing is working. You got to, the family readiness group, you own that now as the company commander. So all these other things that aren't, the marksmanship and the collective skills and the PT scores, like all that is great. You own all that too as the company commander. But that's like the starting point. Your tactical acumen is now the starting point. If you're going to be a successful company commander, you got to bring more to the table. Well, now I look at this from a much wider view, and I look at all these generals, and I say, I didn't think we needed to have this conversation, but we do. Like, if we're going to talk about war fighting, which we should, everybody talks about how the most important thing in the military is war fighting. We got to get back to war fighting because readiness has got to be the top priority. I agree with all that. And we've gotten away from that for a long time. But when you say that, there are some assumptions that are built in. And those assumptions are that we're going to focus on war fighting because a lot of this other stuff has already been taken care of. The loyalty to the nation, the operating within, the framework of the law, loyalty to your oath that you took to the Constitution. But that stuff's not there. That stuff's not there. So, we want to focus on war fighting, which should be our number one priority. But now I got to go back to all these generals and I got to say, you don't understand the oath you took to the Constitution. You literally, I got to question your fucking loyalty to the nation. I got to question if you understand how to operate within the law. All this stuff that should be an assumption for a general officer, but that's now where I got to start when I should be focusing on war fighting. And that's your fault, General. That's your fault that now we got to go and we got to talk about this stuff that should be assumptions, should be a given, And so that's kind of where I see it. That's where we are. We are far more broken as an institution than most people want to admit. Yeah, I get fired up when I talk about this stuff because we're in a bad way. We're in a really bad way.
I think you need to. I think you need to take that down to the 05-06 level because those guys were the captains and majors and even maybe it could have been lieutenants, probably not lieutenants, but they were the mid-level management leaders. Now, they were.
This is what I'd say about my peers, 05s and 06s. So the generals and admirals that all freaking lost their minds. But my peers, 05s and 06s, because a lot of the guys that were battalion commanders with me now, fast forward a couple of years, a lot of them are penning on 06 right now.
Right.
But we could have stopped the mandate if we had enough 05s and 06s that had the courage to say, I'm not going along with that. They couldn't have fired us all. But because, no one had the courage to do it. How many battalion commanders in the active duty Army were relieved for not taking the shot? I'll tell you, 2. And I'm one of them. And I know the other guy. So 2. How many battalion commanders are there in the Army? I don't know, but it's a couple hundred. So 2 out of a couple hundred. So 99+% of battalion commanders in the active duty Army just went along with this unlawful mandate. And it was no better in the Navy. It was no better in the Marine Corps or the Air Force. So 05s and 06s, like you're saying, we collectively could have stopped the mandate. And we failed just like collectively, just like the generals and the admirals did.
It could to take it to something that people could recognize. You look at the scene of Band of Brothers when all those NCOs walked in the 05's office, right? They walked in the men's office and said they're not following, that company commander, and he threw them all out and all that stuff. I think he fired one of them, but it got his attention. And that company commander got relieved, right? And Captain Winters got put in there because, they went in there and he recognized that they were all willing to put their rank and their careers on the line. They felt that strongly about it.
Yeah. And that's why stories like that are so powerful. You know?
Yeah. It's so we got a couple questions and comments in the chat. One is my buddy Doug, who's on the show, who's a big sponsor of the show. It says they need to name a clinic after you on Fort Campbell. Health.
I don't know if that'll ever happen, but that would be funny. Yeah.
The Lieutenant Colonel Brad Miller Immunization Clinic of the 101st.
Wouldn't that be ironic?
Yeah. You could be like the RFK Jr. of the Army. Which that's what they probably do. They should come find you and make you an appointee for RFK Jr. You could be on special assignment to DOD. That would be great. So what have you been doing since you got out? What's life been like since that was a huge, risky step to take and be like, well, I'm not sure what the future holds now. As you say, took your career, took your pay, took your retirement, thrown it off. And I wonder if they're hiring at McDonald's.
Yeah. So kind of 2 things. So, I have my full-time job that I do. So I work from here at home. I work remotely, but I work for a company. And that's kind of my full-time job, so I'm just a normal guy that works for a normal company trying to help them out. And it's a company that just offers different types of therapy to kids. I'm not a therapist, but I do a lot of the behind the scenes operations management or some of the administrative stuff, just kind of on the company side to help the company run. And then on the side, I just do a lot of trying to draw awareness to what's happening, I would say, in the wider government as a whole, but certainly with a specific focus on the military, because that is near and dear to my heart. So I'm certainly not a hater of the military. So I am very proud to be a veteran. I'm still very proud to have served. I'm proud to be a West Point graduate. I am proud to have served 19 plus years in the Army, but I wish that whether it's West Point or whether it's the Army, I wish they would get back to the ethos and the values that they purport to care about, because they have both, widely departed from their own charters and from their own, the pillars of the ethos that they should be perpetuating.
Right. What would you say to someone you ran into through family friend or this or whatever that is thinking about going in, and they came to you and said, "Hey, Mr. Miller, I knew you were in. I'm thinking about going in. What should I go into? What do you recommend?" That kind of stuff. Would you tell them that's the path to take today?
No, I wouldn't. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody not to join, but I probably would not give them my recommendation. And I have had these conversations with people. So let's say I'm talking to somebody who's an 18-year-old, they're coming out of high school or somebody. Well, let's talk about the path you're kind of maybe. What are your goals in life? What about the military do you like? And what do you know about the military? Because a lot of people, if you're like me, when I went to West Point, I didn't know a single person who had ever gone to West Point. In fact, I had never even visited when I just showed up there the first day. So there are people who, when they go to the military, some of them, they've got an older brother in the military. They have a friend who joined. Their father served. But then there are other people who the only thing they know about the military is what they heard from their recruiter and movies that they've seen. So it's, hey, let's talk about what your goals are, what you're looking to do. What is it about the military that you find, attractive? Like, why do you want to go that route? So let's talk about that. And then if somebody really wants to go and they've got their mind set up, then what I would say is, hey, let's talk about how, if that's what you really want to do, let's talk about how you can do that and be successful. So if you're going to go into the military, then make sure you have made your mind up from day one about what you will and will not do. And so if you ever get into a situation where you feel heavily that you are being confronted with something that is unlawful or deprives you of your rights, then just, if you feel like that is a red line for you, then just don't cross that red line, And this is another thing this is a conversation I find myself in a lot as well. So when you join the military, you do not surrender all your rights. You may be told that. You may have drill sergeants that make you believe that, but it's not technically true. Now, you do have a limited expression of some of those rights. That is true. But you do not surrender all your rights. You do not become government property. You will probably be told that. You may be even made to feel that, but it's not technically true. And this is important because there are people out there who believe that. And there are young service members that believe that and believe that they don't have any rights that they can stand on in order to protect themselves if they're being ordered to do something that is unlawful. And last point, because I know I'm kind of rambling here, but like on this note, but this is important. Yes, the military operates on orders. Yes, you have to follow orders. Yes, you have to follow orders that you do not like. You still got to follow them. Yes, you have to follow orders that you may think are unsound. Now, hopefully, if you ever receive an order that you think is unsound, like let's say it doesn't tactically make sense, hopefully there's an opportunity for you to go to whoever issued that order and explain to them, hey, boss, here's why I kind of disagree with this order. Now, sometimes there's not going to be time for that. You're given an order and you're going to have to follow it. But if there's time, can you engage in a dialogue with the person who gave that order? Yes, like that does happen in the military. And there's a dialogue. And if you're told by the issuing authority, which may be the higher commander, hey, you got to do this. Then, you reach what we call the salute point, which is, all right, I expressed my difference of opinion with this. The boss said still do it, so I'm gonna do it. But all of that is assuming that the order that you received was lawful.
That's the key.
When we're talking about an unlawful order, now we're in a completely different category. And the military actually does a pretty good job of teaching even its junior service members that not only are you not obligated to follow an unlawful order, you actually have a moral obligation to disobey that unlawful order. Now we don't want to just
that's kind
willy-nilly disobey orders, but if you believe you've received an unlawful order, then approach your boss for clarification and say, hey, sir, maybe I didn't quite understand the order. Maybe I didn't hear you correctly. Maybe I'm reading this written order wrong. Is there something that I'm missing here? And one of two things might happen. One, you might actually save the boss, because in a moment of stress, like let's think about combat scenarios here. In a moment of stress, your boss might have actually given you an unlawful order. And if you catch him and you approach for clarification, you might actually get him to rescind that order. And maybe you just saved his career, and you just saved, a situation from going really, really bad. Or maybe you misunderstood it. Maybe it wasn't an unlawful order, and when you approach for clarification and it gets cleared up, you realize there was a misinterpretation on your part. Either way, there has now been a positive outcome that has resulted from you approaching for clarification for that order. However, if you approach and your boss sticks to the unlawful order, then you have no choice but to disobey.
Yeah, it's we call it, right, and we call it a shoot no shoot decision, right? We'll put it in a scenario. That boss may say, call in that fire mission on that whatever building, house, whatever. If you know there's innocents in there, and you know you're going to murder innocent people and not combatants, right? You may say that we've seen him, you saw him, I saw him, whatever. What you may not know is maybe they've already been cleared. Maybe it's already been vetted, but right, because you're whatever rank you are, and the old man has already done it. He said, call in that mission, and he said, look, we got to get this, suppressed right now. You could stand by your guns, right? That's that shoot, no shoot decision.
Yep.
You may find out later they were right, you were wrong, and you're going to have to deal with what the outcome of that is.
And now there's going to be an investigation, and people are going to start asking uncomfortable questions. Right. And the way you deal with that as if you're a commander, if you're a first sergeant, if you're a platoon leader, if you're a platoon sergeant, if you're a battalion commander or a battalion command sergeant major, the way you deal with this is when you're doing your tactical training, you incorporate this type of stuff into your tactical training scenarios. What we don't do is go into a classroom and talk about these situations in a sterile classroom. It doesn't stick. Right. You can do that, but you have to supplement it with the actual training that is happening on the ground, so that soldiers realize that this isn't just something we talk about in a classroom. This is something that we train about on the ground when we're conducting all our other types of training scenarios.
Yeah, the lawful order is the one out the military has, but it's one that if you're gonna play that card, you better be right.
You better be right.
And you talk about, right, I'll give you a scenario. A lot of people don't know this, right? So I was in Desert Storm. In Desert Storm, they lined us up one day in a platoon sergeant Humvee. The medics were there, and the anthrax shot back then was not authorized to give to humans, right? It was used for cows and all that stuff, and there was a whole bunch of things people remember with the FDA and all that stuff. It was not cleared. We weren't given a choice. I was in the Saudi desert, a few miles from the Iraqi border. They lined us up, said, you're getting it. They gave it to us.
Yep.
It never showed up in my medical records for the rest of my career. There's no record of it. Didn't have a choice. We were about to launch across the line, and they're like, we don't know what Saddam's throwing at us. You're getting this anthrax shot. Didn't matter what the news was saying. It didn't matter what litigated back in the States. This is the way it's going to be. You just deal with it, right? And needless to say, when I went to Afghanistan and now it was optional, I said, no, I'm good. I've got the one shot for the rest of my life shot. Mine's so powerful that I don't ever need another one. And guys on my team didn't understand. They were all getting the anthrax shot. I'm like, nope, I'm good. I got one. So tell me about it. So, but I mean, those decisions are made. Hopefully they're not for your detriment, but a thing like a COVID shot, they knew they couldn't. Yeah. They could tell you to do it, and you could not, and they could say, okay, we're kicking you out. But, they did it back in stateside. They did it where you had the choice to still get out. They didn't force it on people, but they could have. And like you said, through coercion and peer pressure and all kind of things and threats, they kind of did the same thing to a lot of people, right?
And a lot of people point back at kind of the anthrax playbook, and they say, hey, this is kind of similar. And, because people have gone back to look at what happened with anthrax too, and have said that, and in fact, there are some people who have said when DOD looks at trying to get this right for what happened with the COVID shot mandate, at the same time, they should try and go back and correct what happened with a lot of the anthrax shot cases as well.
I mean, I'm not saying it's connected, but I used to have hair like you, man. Look at this. I don't know if it's because of anthrax shot, but I mean, the Fabio hair there too flowing, but we'll see. But yeah. So hey, we can go a little over now. I don't want to take up your whole night, but as you look back, you said you have no regrets. Do you see this as there's songs about unanswered prayers and that kind of stuff, and there's people that think, hey, we don't know what God has in store for us, and things happen for a reason. Do you see this? That yes, you got out at 19 years, 3 months, you didn't get your retirement, all that stuff, but that it was the best thing. Do you see that as a good thing of how this happened? Because
I do think it was a good thing. I wouldn't do it differently. In some ways, I do think it has made my life harder. Like financially, it's made my life much harder. I was at the kind of at the finish line of a career. Not so much. I wasn't necessarily. I had kind of told myself mentally that I was going to do about 25 years because I was so close to 20.
Right.
I wanted to finish battalion command. That put me at about 20, but I was still looking to go a couple more years, see if I could make 06. So in my head, I was kind of telling myself about 25. So I wasn't necessarily right at the finish line in terms of that, but in terms of securing a pension and then knowing that my future is now kind of secured financially. And now that's all out the window, right? I mean, I had to walk away from all of that. So financially, it's made my life much harder. That's just something I have to deal with. But on the whole, I think that's a small price to pay for being proud of the decision that I made, feeling like I was on the wrong side, feeling like I was on the right side, and then feeling like the last couple of years have vindicated my position. I mean, I get heated about this stuff. I get passionate. I mean, I was using some colorful language earlier. I apologize for that, but I get heated about this because I think what has happened and where our country is right now, I think it's time for serious people to get serious about serious things. That's kind of where we are as a country.
Yeah. So let me ask you, you talked about vindication. We've seen a lot of young people, a lot of medical issues, especially young people falling over left, right, and center in practice and training and this and this stuff.
Yep.
Do you think, I mean, and it became common. The first thing that happened, like, I wonder what shot they got. I mean, and now we're getting more and more evidence, which normally would come out of medical trials and research and stuff that when it goes through the normal process, we're seeing all this. Do you feel like that's something that's vindicated you? Like, this is why I knew this wasn't ready. I knew this wasn't, had to happen.
Yeah. I do. Not, now that stuff's sad. It's unfortunate, but yes, I do view it as a vindication. Now, there are two reasons why I didn't take the shot. So one is health reasons for myself personally. Like, I didn't want to take it, but that's not the main reason. That's actually the secondary reason. The primary reason that I didn't take it is because I thought this was part of a much larger scheme, and I considered it to be treason. I felt that way 4 years ago. I feel that way I just feel like the evidence has pointed much more in that direction since then. So I thought that this was part of a much larger plot. I still believe it. I have a lot of questions about the public health emergencies that kind of set the conditions for something like warp speed to take place, which enabled the rollouts, which then enabled the distribution of the shots, which then enabled the mandates. And I think a lot of what we have seen in terms of the injuries that have been suffered, I think a lot of that was intentional. And that is absolutely the way that I feel. And I think that as a country, we were attacked. And I wish more people cared about that.
Yeah. It's you look back now, people, we were wiping down Amazon packages and spraying their mail and quarantining it in your garage, all the stuff we do, right? It just, no one knew. And everyone just was, we saw these trucks of people in Italy just hauling bodies away and all that stuff. And just, I mean, it was, they spun a great narrative, and, but hopefully the not only just the people around the world, but in America, we fell for that once, and hopefully never again. Right.
Hopefully never again.
Before it was, walk this aisle down Walmart, right? Walk down in this aisle, you got to walk another way. I mean, all these stupid things.
Yeah.
And now we look at it and go, I can't believe we did all that dumb stuff. I can't, hey, you want to make me work from home or give me a paycheck? Well, okay. But it's like, the gym shutting down. Here, it's a disease. People are sick. It's affecting your lungs and breathing. It's like, nope, don't go outside and don't work out. It was just like,
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Don't work out. Don't go outside. Yeah, absolutely. Wear a mask if you go to the beach. just all that stuff.
I knew it was BS when they said you could just tie a bandana around your face and that was good enough. And I was like, what? Like the thing I ran around with as a kid and playing Cowboys and that's
Right.
I'm like, I don't feel like that's a medical solution, but as my buddy said, the one I told you got the picture with General Abrams, he goes, until they're burning bodies, it's not a pandemic. That was all he said. If they're not burning bodies, then it's not a pandemic.
Yeah.
But it was a fool, catch me once, fool me once, it's on me. Hopefully that's the only one we're ever going to see. I'm not sure this country's ever going to go for it again, but yeah, it is sad to see all this happen. And it's even more sad, Brad, as I look at it and go, prior to this, no one ever thought NIH, CDC, any of that would ever be political. We used to, we may not trust the World Health Organization, but pretty much scientists and doctors, we pretty much, regardless if they were government employees or not, we took them for their work.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
That's never, now the CDC can't do it. And people are like, well, it's CDC. Who knows? What's their motive? It's really skewed the perception of these, what I think organizations, but then again, we could talk deep state has done that to their intelligence community too. But, it's skewed this perception that everyone thought they were above reproach or above the noise, political partisanship. Nothing can be trusted anymore.
Yeah.
To me, that's long-term effect, a bad effect for this.
Yep.
But anyways, hey, we've had you on a long time, Brad. It has been great talking to you. I really appreciate you giving a lot of the Thursday evening. Before we wrap up, anything else we didn't cover? Any other topics or anything you want to let our viewers and listeners know you got going on, or is there anything that means?
Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, thanks again for the invite. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. If people want to know where they can find me, there's two major places you can find me pretty easily. So one of those is on Twitter or X, just at my name. So at Brad Miller 1010, at Brad Miller 1010. So I'm fairly active on there. And then also you can find me on my Substack. So I post videos and stuff on my Substack. I write a lot on my Substack, and you can find that at bradmiller10.substack.com.
All right.
Yeah, that's my Twitter. Yeah. Yep. And then my Substack is bradmiller10.substack.com. People can find me there as well.
Awesome. Well, I saw your Substack a little earlier. You definitely have a lot of good stuff up there. Are you writing a book? Is there a book coming?
Yeah. Slowly. So for a couple of years now, I have been working on a draft of a book. So I do want to write one. That is a goal that I have. I have a lot written. It's still pretty rough, but yeah, I do hope to get that out at some point.
Is it going to be focused kind of on the experience of this whole thing and just like lessons learned?
It will. I kind of, it'll be a little bit about my situation, but not so much because that's ultimately super important. It's just that in telling my story, I just want to draw attention to kind of what service members in general suffered, but then I also want to take kind of a wider view and look at what's happening in our society. How did this happen? How does this affect everyday Americans? What do we learn from this? What you were just talking about a minute ago. How do we ensure that this never happens again? How were so many people kind of manipulated into believing this in the first place? So what kind of needs to happen inside the American psyche to ensure that this never happens again?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you keep us up on that.
Will do.
Would love to, when that comes out, get you back on and promote that.
Sure.
Have you on anytime. I know we talked before.
Right.
You're definitely going to come on and be a guest on our Lima Charlie show. So for those watching, keep an eye on that. We'll be having Brad on there, talk a little bit more about his military career and his deployments. But hey, sir, thank you so much, man. Great to meet you. Everyone else, thanks for joining. You guys have been seeing our sponsors scroll along the bottom. Be sure to check them out. And again, keep an eye. I know we missed the last couple of Lima Charlies. I was traveling, seeing the grandkids last week. So we'll get some of those back up, and be sure to tune in here every Thursday night. So with that being said, Brad, have a great night. And everyone, thank you for tuning in.
All right, Stu. Thank you. Have a good one.